Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. Today's video is for the Historic Best of 3 format. If you're looking for Historic Best of 1, Standard, Explore, Alchemy, check out the playlist. We try to cover each format once a week so you get your fill, kind of see what's the latest hotness in terms of the formats themselves. With Historic, we did get the injection of the Lord of the Rings set in the last 2 weeks. Having said that, with Best of 3, it does take a little bit longer for Untapped, the companion tool that we're looking at, to aggregate the stats. So normally we would have some numbers, but between the ladder reset and the new set coming so close to month end, we don't have a huge amount of data, but I wanted to get some decks that have been showing up to give you some ideas of how the new Lord of the Rings cards are fitting into the Best of 3 format. So we have Untapped on the screen, so we'll take a look at that. Platinum to Mythic rank because the ladder reset. So Untapped aggregates like user data, your own win rates with others, gives us cool stats. The link is in the video description. Paste all these deck lists with timestamps so you can access it as well. And as always, if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe on the video. All free, easy ways to help out. So June 27th through the 4th, Platinum to Mythic rank 7,300, so not a huge sample size. And we're just going to jump right into it. So we have Rakdos Midrange. So a couple of the new cards from the set have really had an impact on the format itself. So this version of the deck is at 71% win rate. We have Orcish Bowmaster, so very powerful card. So 2 mana for a 1/1 flash. So, okay, seems kind of whatever, but when it enters the battlefield or whenever an opponent draws a card except for the first one they draw each of their draw steps, the Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, and then you get to amass an orc. 1. So basically you create a token if you don't have an existing token. If you have the existing token, it just gets 1 more counter on it, and then it gets you a little larger that way there. So this lets you ping, like say Teferi plus, any effects like that. You really are punishing other ring decks in this format, which we'll cover in a sec. And it's just a nice threat to kind of come in at your opponent's end step. You also have access to the One Ring. So the $2 million card, which was found like an hour from my house, so it kind of feels bad that it was that close to having a $2 million card. But for the non-$2 million versions, the One Ring is a very powerful card. It is giving you protection for the turn, and then it gives you a bunch of card draw each turn. The life loss is offset because you have Shieldred, which can gain you back more than you lose, and plays really nicely there. The rest of the deck, you got Fable the Mirror Breakers, another card that can be punished by the Bowmasters if your opponent plays it. Crucius to help you tutor stuff, including Invoke Despair as a 1-of. So you can ditch like extra copies of Ring or Shieldred, find Invoke Despair. The rest of the deck, 7 discard spells for early interaction, Fatal Push, Croxa to get back some value from the graveyard. They're opting for Heartless Act. I was speaking to the person who built this deck on Twitter about one of the sideboard choices that we'll get to in a sec. I don't know if I really necessarily like Heartless Act. There's a number of ways to put counters in the format, especially like the Humans deck, stuff like that. Incidentally, the Bowmaster tokens also. I think there's fewer artifacts. Like this can hit Esper Sentinel where the others can't. So it's kind of like iffy in terms of what you want. I would probably still play Go for the Throat. I think counters are more common than some of the artifacts in the format. Incidentally, this card also punishes a lot of X1s, so like Llanowar Elves, which is a pretty rough in terms of matchups, the Mono Green Devotion deck that I've found from the Rakdos side. But this is a deck I'm going to try start off. I was playing a lot of Rakdos before. In the sideboard, you have Pithing Needle for like activated abilities, Planeswalker, stuff of that nature. You have Molten Impact, 2-for-1 removal in often cases, Graveyard Hate with the Licensors, Brotherhood End as a sweeper, Go Blank for Hand Hate, Liliana of the Veil for like the control big mana matchups, Night of Soul Betrayal as a tutorable effect for some of the like Goblins decks, stuff of that nature. Now normally with this card, this comes in lieu of some of your bigger threats, but with the One Ring, it's not as tutorable as you would have it in the past with Crucius. So I probably would personally just play like another Brotherhood's End in place of that, but it is a call that you can bring in there. And then you have the Invoke Despairs, just second copy, kind of the grind value, and then Peer into the Abyss was the card I was asking about. So this obviously combos with Shieldred. Your opponent draws half their library, loses half their life, but then with the Shieldred out, they lose The additional half, this also works with Bowmaster, so kind of two ways. The thought was to bring this in against like mono green, some of the decks that just beat you, that kind of go over the top, like the mid-range piles. It's actually a really interesting way because the mono green matchup was quite hard to deal with from like our side of the board. Some other cards that I've generally liked in these Rakdos decks in my sideboard, I was on the 1 Invoke, 1 Chandra, 6 mana, the uncounterable one. I do like that for heavy blue-based decks, just to have a threat that's uncounterable in that case. I'm not huge on Liliana the Veil, but in this version it might be sufficient given that you have access to so many One Rings to kind of refill your hand at a higher pace than your opponent. From there, we go to the Abzan Sacrifice combo deck, 60% win rate. So this is another Orcish Bowmaster deck, but there is an infinite combo with this deck. You have Samwise Ganji, so whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you create a food token. So with Cauldron Familiar, Samwise, and the Woe Strider, you can infinitely have the cat enter the battlefield, which triggers Sam, which creates a food token. Then you sack the Woe Strider, it dies, you bring it back with the food token, and you can drain your opponent out that way there. You have some Elves for mana ramp. Then you have like the Blood Artist effect, Zulakort to drain out your opponents. Priest of Forgotten Gods is like sack outlet. Collected Company as a way to kind of dig through the deck. And then Tyvar Jubilant Brawler as a way to kind of give your stuff pseudo haste like the Priest and your Dorks, but also then mill to kind of find you combo pieces as well. In terms of the sideboard, you got a Jengantha Companion, Bone Shards is catch-all removal, some pushes, hand hate, a sweeper, artifact enchantment hate, and then graveyard hate in the Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze over Hearse because it can be found with both Bowmaster and the Collected Companies. We then go to a blue-black ring control. So Alth MTG got number 1 Mythic at the beginning of the month with this one. So Alth plays a lot of Historic, and this is an interesting build. Tried it out. I like the Rakdos deck, just more my playstyle, but it's kind of like a Dimir Tempo control. So you got Snapcaster Mages, the Bowmasters, and the Brazen Borrowers. You have the One Ring in here, some counter spells mixed in, Heartless Axe, Fatal Pushes, consider Cling to Dust for Graveyard Hate, all the Storm Giant as another threat. Just some tempo cards, more counters in the sideboard for various things, cut downs, and Cling to Dust. I played a game of this just to kind of get a feel for it. Obviously, the first game I drew 4 Make Disappears into an Allosaurus Shepherd out of Elves, which just felt awful. Didn't manage to win that game. However, I did find that I do probably would want like an Extinction event or some sort of sweeper. If decks go wide, you have a lot of 1-for-1 removal, but it's hard to kind of keep up pace in those regards. So I think I would prefer that. I also found just like the threat density of the deck a little low. You are relying heavily on these, but none of these really close out the deck, like your opponent, that quickly. And you don't have like big kind of like farewells or like sweepers in the sense of blue-white that you can multi your opponent, or just like a Teferi that takes over in that regard. Obviously worked out well for them since they got a pretty high win rate in terms of the deck. Just, again, not my particular play style. We also had a historic Golgari Yawgmoth deck by Mozu that got number 6 Mythic. So some early shells, and this one here is using a Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, and with the Young Wolf Undying with Hapatra. So how it works is with Yawgmoth, you could sack another creature. So this dies, it comes back with a 1/1 counter on it, which then you can target like a creature, it gets a -1/1, and then it creates a token whenever one or more creatures gets 1/1, and then you can basically keep sacking those creatures to put 1/1s for the Undying, and then you sack this, and then it comes back. So you're basically resetting the Undying. And then with like Prosperous Innkeeper or Blood Artist, you can either gain infinite life or drain your opponent out infinite times. Gets you some card draw in here. You got Yogs, you got Rings in here. Eldritch Evolution helps you find pieces. The Delighted Halfling ramps you and then makes your legendary creatures uncounterable. Kind of mixed into that shell as well. And then you got like Karns, kind of shuts off your opponent's rings, lets you have pseudo-tutorable answers out of the side. Haywire Might, notably with Haywire Might, it's an exile condition, so it does hit your opponent's rings, which is pretty solid. Your other copy of Bowmaster for card draw, Fatal Push in there, just some more removal, protection, like artifact or creature and planeswalker removal with Convoke, since you can generally go wide. and then just like hand hate, graveyard hate, and then kind of pseudo graveyard hate as well. And then lastly, we have blue-white control. So this version of the deck got 67 mythic, and they went 20-4 with the list. So this is from Stelpano. So this version here, it's a ring control deck. You got Divine Purges. The ring plays really nicely with Dream Trawler since you can activate, draw a bunch of cards. Dream Trawler gets bigger, and then you can gain a bunch of life. Snapcasters, Reprieves, so like some tempo elements, only a couple to fairies. So a little bit more on the kind of tempo-y style, but an interesting build nonetheless. A Reliquary Tower in there is kind of an interesting inclusion in the mana base. Your sideboard, you got Stern Scolding, which is a 1-mana counterspell, CMC 2 or less. Just some counters, another Purge, Timely Reinforcement, gains you a bunch of life, gives you some creatures, some graveyard hate between Rest in Peace and Hearse, some more counters, and then March as a general catch-all removal. So that's kind of it from a high level for the week. If you are playing anything, you're trying it out, some stuff I've seen but just haven't seen like full deck list yet. The Delighted Halfling is being seen play in the the gem builds. It can let you turn 2 Crucius or Jarsoul uncounterable, and then turn 3 Ring, so it's some nice synergy there. Turn 3 Sheoldred helps you fix your mana. That's seeing similar play in Modern in the 4-color money piles, since you can get like turn 3 through Fairy. In Historic, it's 4 mana because of the nerf, but kind of some ideas and strategies there. So let me know what you think, what you've been playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.